So please welcome Jono. And Jono, thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you. Got your mic?
Thank you, Todd. How's everyone doing? You didn't get the coffee? All right, how's everyone doing? Okay, can we have some slides, please? AV people, that'd be helpful. So first of all, thank you, Todd. I really appreciate the kind welcome. I felt honored to be invited to come and speak. Let's go all the way back. Honored to come and MC the talks this year. I came here for the first time last year, and I was absolutely astonished by the quality of this conference. It was my first time, and I think Todd and team have done such a wonderful job. So please give them a big round of applause. So I just want to take a couple of minutes to share a few thoughts that I'd like to set the stage for the conference, for the keynotes, and some things to think about throughout the event. I've spent the duration of my career with one very singularly focused goal, and that is to understand every nuance of how we build predictable, productive, and accessible communities. I believe that community is at the center of how we innovate and how we just build a better planet. People enjoy working together. And there's plenty of examples of incredible communities happening all over the world. We've seen, of course, the growth of Wikipedia, the expansion of open source across different industries. We've seen the maker revolution that's happening. Companies bring in open source principles and community methodologies into their companies, and the public becoming the VC with crowdfunding. And what's exciting to me is that the data backs up this growth and this trend. If you look at these graphs, for example, we see hockey stick curves of community growth and participation across a variety of different areas and industries. And what this taps into is that people want to work together as animals, and we want to do work that's meaningful and impactful. One of the finest places to do this, of course, is technology. And just as a couple of examples, Wikipedia, 22 million plus articles, hundreds of different languages. Linux and Linux distributions are another great example. Tens of thousands of developers, hundreds of companies working together, often competing with each other. And I'm a consultant. I work with companies to help them build communities, community strategy and execution. And when I talk to companies, they often ask, what's the financial value of this as well? And while there's not a tremendous amount of data on this, the data is positive as well. I mean, the Smithsonian valued Wikipedia at tens of billions of dollars. The Linux Foundation assessed that if you were to rebuild Fedora, it would cost nearly $11 billion to do that with a commercial software methodology. So to me, what this does is it changes the conversation. Is that I've been going to conferences for years, like many of you people in technology, and we always talk about code. The software development lifecycle, how do we build it? How do we build quality, predictable, and low-cost code as well? But to me, what's as important, if not more important here, is how we build communities, is how we get people involved, because communities don't just provide code. They provide advocacy, documentation, translations, accessibility. They bring new ideas and fresh approaches and diversity. So I'd like you to think about how we do this throughout the course of All Things Open. And when I think back to this goal, one of the things I've learned over the years is there's a fascinating array of things that you can determine how we build high quality communities, but the real challenge here is how you make it predictable. How do you take methodologies and package them up in a way that people can consume and apply and deliver predictable results? And that's difficult because human beings are messy, frankly. We're difficult people to figure out. So the way I tend to think of this is that there are three primary layers to this. The first is collaboration. So this is the software development lifecycle piece. This is code hosting, collaboration, peer review, continuous integration, deployment, containerization, all of those different pieces. This is the meat and potatoes of how we do this. But what sits on top of that is engagement. This is how you pull people in. How do you get people excited and participating? How do you retain them? How do you govern? How do you incentivize them in different ways? What's fascinating to me and what's been a real revelation in the last 3 or 4 years for me is that underlying all of this is the psychology of how people think and operate in behavioral economics. That we are fundamentally irrational human beings, but we're irrational in very predictable ways. And when we understand that, it provides a framework, a scaffolding, a skeleton in which we can build effective collaboration, and then on top of that, we can build effective engagement. And I think when we look at this and how we build communities strategically, is that we should start from the bottom layer up. Is that you can only build effective collaboration if you understand how people think and operate, because then you're actually essentially writing software that knows about the hardware. But you can only build effective engagement if you understand and build effective collaborative methodologies as well. From a metrics perspective, where this is a little different, is that typically we go down the other way, is that typically when I talk to companies, they really care about metrics, but they care about the engagement metrics. But the deeper you go down here, you get more value. If you assess and measure collaboration, you understand your developers better. But if you understand the psychology of how people operate, you really get to the heart of how human beings like to collaborate and build communities. But it's not just about these three different layers, because community is fundamentally a journey. And this is, to me, is the most pleasurable aspect of this, is that someone joins your community, they're fresh, and you can take them on a journey that's incredibly rewarding and delivers incredible value. And I tend to think of it a little bit like this, is that when they join, you need to get them onto an on-ramp so they can make their first contribution. That in itself, you could write books about. You know, making an experience that's simple and effective for people who are brand new, who have no context in their relationships. But then what happens is they flow through these different groups. At first they're new, then they become regulars, and then some of them become leaders. And the way in which we do that is through incentives, intrinsic and extrinsic rewards, opportunities, and engagement. So what I'd like you to think about throughout, not just the keynotes, because our keynotes are each going to touch on different areas here, but throughout the rest of the event, is these three layers. Because this is at the heart of everything that we do. Everyone's got a vested interest in one of these different layers, and for most of us in many of these different layers. Think about how this applies to your organizations, but also everybody in this room has got a piece of the puzzle in their heads. And this is the value to me of events like All Things Open, is that when we get together, we can move this forward, and then the industry can innovate as well. And I would love to just meet all of you and talk about this, because I'm a nerd about this kind of stuff. So if I see you in the corridor, please come over and say hello. So this neatly segues onto our first keynote, and I couldn't think of a better person to kind of continue this conversation and to head down this pathway. Jim Whitehurst is the CEO of Red Hat, and Jim used to be the COO of Delta Airlines. And I think for a lot of people, when you think of someone going from an airline to an open source company, you imagine that's not going to be a good fit. And Jim has had the opposite effect. He's brought incredible growth to Red Hat. Red Hat is a multi-billion-dollar company. One of the things that impressed me since I've got to know Jim most about him is not just his accomplishments, but it's his approach. He's warm, he's kind, he's collaborative, and I think he instills the very principles that make open source such a wonderful place to be and such a pleasurable environment to be in. And that's why I think he is one of the most phenomenal leaders in technology. So please, put your hands together for Jim Whitehurst.